Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukatali.
And a very good morning to you. This is Newsline, live as always from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. And of course we broadcast on TV1, which is part of the Capital Maharaj Group. And as we begin our work this week to celebrate the Sinhalese and Tamil New Year, we are sometimes reminded of the growing influence of our superpower neighbour, India. And to discuss a little bit about that is a quite an ordinary Indian citizen who has a rich involvement in Sri Lanka. And on that note, we'd best introduce to you Mr. Neil Chatterjee. Good morning to you, Mr. Chatterjee.
Good morning, Faraz.
And welcome on board Newsline.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you on here. Is this true now? Sri Lanka's fortunes are, they say, linked forever and a day to the progress and development of India. Is that true?
Okay, before I say anything, let me preface the entire show with a confession that I am not a political analyst, but over the years, having worked in the private sector, in advertising and multinational companies, and including a bank, I have a point of view on an ordinary man's point of view, so please do take what I say with a roomful of salt.
Now, now that you put your caveat there, tell us the answer. Is it true? Sri Lanka's fortunes are linked to India's progress.
If you had asked me this question 50 years ago, I probably would have said yes. But right now, with the kind of communication and the interconnected and the completely connected world we live in, no country is actually dependent wholly and solely on another country. There are other partnerships, other collaborations, other, not necessarily geographical proximity, which is driving relationships anymore. So yes and no. Yes, Sri Lanka, in the trade front, is pretty well linked with India. And no, that doesn't restrict Sri Lanka from having linkages, stronger linkages perhaps, with other countries.
But, you know, you take quite a lot of our youth. They seem to almost be able to speak the Hindi quite well, or Malayalam, because they're watching all these films.
Yes. Now that you ask me, yes, the film industry, both in what we call Bollywood in Bombay, or Tollywood in Andhra Pradesh, or in Tamil Nadu, or in Kerala, is a very, very strong influencer. And it's not just in Sri Lanka, it's also true in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan, and bits and pieces of Central Asia. So that soft linkage through films and television shows is very much a reality.
Now, Mr. Chatterjee, in talking about India's influence and so on, I don't know which one to put first, but let me try. Narendra Modi, some say that he's the best thing that happened to India since sliced bread was introduced to the world. Others say that Mr. Modi is actually nothing more than a big-time terrorist. The contrast, the gap is enormous. What is he really? Is he good news for India? Is he good news for us?
Okay, let's put it this way. The BJP, Modi-led BJP government is actually a national democratic alliance which has other parties in it. In the last general election in 2014, the BJP on its own, with about 280 plus seats, have a majority in a 542-seat parliament. Having said that, you have a youngish, given the average age of leaders across the world, dynamic, very hardworking, very result-oriented person.
Right.
So you put those two things together, and you make him the driver of growth or development, and people are justified in thinking that he would ride roughshod and get things done very quickly. So that is, he has never, since 2002, where after the Gujarat riots, has uttered a single think publicly or privately, privately I wouldn't know, publicly, to give any other dimension to it.
And is that good? Do you think he's fully shaken off that Gujarat business?
I would think so, but however, having said that, the BJP has been painted, sometimes correctly, mostly incorrectly, as a Hindu driving party, or putting the Hindus in front under the name Hindutva. Some of the fringe elements in the BJP since 2014 have spoken out of turn, spoken a lot of nonsense, which in a way Mr. Modi and his cabinet have been trying to allay. That is a fact. Now, it is this kind of statements from the fringe is great fodder for the so-called liberals, people like us, armchair liberals. And we talk about it, it gets picked up by the liberal press, and so you have this sort of schizophrenic picture of Mr. Modi.
Yeah.
But I think decisive...
It was for Mr. Modi, I mean for the world, that Gujarat business was quite troubling and worrying. And if I'm not mistaken, even the American government was a bit reluctant about issuing a visa to him at one point.
Yeah, they were. They were. And as it stands, nobody can condone any riots anywhere in the world.
That's right.
But having created, I don't know who's created them, I leave it to you, having created pockets of trouble in Iraq, Syria, Egypt, barring Tunisia, Libya, having created such pockets of trouble, I think this is a drop in the ocean.
Well, you know, it might be a drop in the ocean, but we've had talking about riots, we've had our fair riots in this country.
I would say, more than a fair share.
More than a fair share. Our network has been attacked. It was destroyed. Our group was destroyed, all but destroyed in '83. And the turnaround has been absolutely astonishing by anyone's standards.
Phenomenal.
You know, so bad words, stones, quite literally stones, and bricks. We've got one on display down there,
yes,
given to us as a present,
yes,
from no less a person than our current Prime Minister, to commemorate all the help that we gave him, obviously. But it hasn't stopped. You know, we've had Claymore bombs and all sorts of things. We were called traitors, but then we've come around, we've fought all that.
That is human nature. You can't have a simmering pot all the time. It either boils over or you put off the fire.
Right.
So the simmering pot, which was Sri Lankan's ethnic issue, was both, the fire was put out, and that's it. How it was done is for a completely, and that's the political piece which I know nothing about. But since the end of the strife, I think the country has an opportunity to grow in leaps and bounds.
Yes, but Sri Lanka has always had these opportunities. But back to Mr. Modi and his and whether he's good or bad news. He must be good news in terms of when you examine the voting figures.
Yes, he's also good news when you examine the stock market figure.
Right.
We crossed 30,000 on the Bombay Stock Exchange Index for the first time ever, despite the so-called devastating effects of demonetization.
That's where I've led you there nicely then.
Good.
What about all this money? They've just cancelled out these notes.
Those notes are useless.
Yeah.
Those notes which were converted,
Yeah.
and therefore they are now useful because they are now a new currency.
Yeah.
Those that were not converted, which might get converted at a later date, will attract phenomenal penalties, up to 75 to 80%. And those that are unclaimed becomes the government's wealth. Because at the end of the day, a currency is only a promissory note from the central bank.
Yeah.
So the central bank doesn't have to pay it anymore.
So is there widespread from the business community? Is there, they might have stashed away all this money, 500 rupee notes.
And what are they going to do with it? Build boats?
So what happened? Do you think, what is their sentiment? What do you detect?
The initial sentiment from November, December and into January, if you look at the common person, did face hardships as to long lines at the ATM counters, etc., etc. And in the business community, where a lot of cash transactions, both above board and under the table, had got stymied, and a lot of it is not coming back into a cash format.
But don't you think that these big time business corporates and so on, who facing huge loss because they had all this cash, don't you think that we all getting together and getting ready to push get the opposition chap to take over and win the next election?
Show me an opposition chap and then we'll begin to talk.
Is it that bad, the opposition?
Are you keeping track of Indian politics? Tell me. I'd love to go back home and discuss that with my circle of friends.
Yeah.
There is no opposition.
There is no opposition
at the moment.
But you have rather a long link to this country of ours.
Yes.
And I think you came here as the country manager for one of those cola things.
That's true.
Right? And so you seem to have an enduring link to this country.
Oh, I love Sri Lanka, and I love all my friends here.
There you are. So what do you feel? Do you think that Sri Lanka will benefit better by having more more links with India through FTAs and so on and so forth? Or is it better, you think, that we have it more spread out?
As I said at the beginning, did I say that geographical proximity is not necessarily the way to go, or shouldn't be the only driver of free trade and trade?
Yeah.
Having said that, I think India has a lot to offer to Sri Lanka, as well as Sri Lanka has a lot to offer to India.
Yeah.
In just stability around the region, given that India has ongoing issue with another neighbor. So yes, I think mutually both will benefit, and just because of the size of India, both in terms of geography and population, people get the feeling that it dominates. But actually, a lot of Indian policy has not been that dominating or even that strong, but it could have been. So, yes and no. To the business community, we are always, and as I said, as you mentioned, I work with a digital company. I think there, Sri Lanka can form a part of a SAARC digital effort, because, as you know, that recognizes no passports and no physical boundaries. It will develop, but I think Sri Lanka has strong associations in trade with Australia and New Zealand, Singapore, Dubai. So it's not what it used to be in an unconnected world as in the 40s, 50s and 60s.
You must have noticed all the multi-unit dwellings, also known as apartments.
Condominiums, I would have said.
That coming up in Colombo, and it's now also in places like in Gaul and so on.
Right.
Do you think a lot of Indians will be buying?
I think they would love to, because there is a trend of buying a holiday home, a second home, which is more salubrious than the place. So Delhiites are buying in Goa, Bombayites are buying in Goa, and down the coastline. There's something about mountains and coastlines which bring peace and quiet after a heavy, hectic schedule at work.
Right.
So yes, I think Indians would be very tempted to buy. Now I believe the laws have changed and you can, one. And two, will be used. Of course, it has a downside. There will be traffic congestion, parking issues and everything else. If you look at The Economist, this issue, parking is a big problem.
Do you think some Indians might be worried that they've got Mr. Modi with his Gujarat experience behind him, and that they come into another country where this Prime Minister has also got a similar
as the people of the US are rushing into Canada, you would say, wouldn't you?
Yes.
No, I don't think so.
No?
No, I don't think. You see, you can paint Mr. Modi, paint Mr. Trump, paint Mr. Putin in any color you want because they're such individually strong characters. A person you can't paint is somebody like a Cameron.
Right. Okay.
Yeah? So that's what I want to say, that even Erdogan in Turkey is a strong character. And he's taking decisions. On the flip side, on what is everybody loves the person, and I love him too, is Mr. Trudeau in Canada. He seems to be the role model of any political leader.
What about Miss Merkel then?
Miss Merkel, well, let's put it this way, she's Germanic.
Right. She's strong, she's running for another...
Oh, she's not as strong as she used to be. I think when she let her heart dictate her head on the refugee issue, she lost a lot of popular goodwill.
Now then, but isn't Germany sort of the engine of growth?
Absolutely, absolutely. They are, I mean, they've always been industrious, hard-working, disciplined, and which is the basic issue between Germany and Greece. And seen from a business point of view, you'd rather be doing business in Germany, commercial activity, than doing it in Greece.
So one needs a sort of good leader, doesn't it, to drive
strong, good
growth.
leader.
Yeah. Do you observe politics in Sri Lanka whilst you're here? Or is it something that you can't get away from?
No, the first stint was 95, 96, 97.
Right.
That's about the time the talks, kind of, 95 is when it broke down. So I spent 3 years in Colombo as almost hostage to all the roadblocks and everything else.
Right.
Okay, so that, obviously the strife and the war is in your face. And my wife used to take a walk in Independence Square, and it blew up, and she didn't have a mobile phone those days, and I did, and it was all kind of weird to just understand that she was safe. Having said that, the last time I was here was at 2012 and 2013, a complete sea change. And of course I followed the politics here. I think it has all the ups and downs of a good democracy.
Yeah.
And I think change of administration is also a signal that the voter is alive, kicking, and aware. And if you're not in step with him or her, he or she is likely to kick you out.
Now then, tell me, from the perspective of a foreigner here, we don't consider you a foreigner, but you are. How does when you go about your business in here,
right,
and you experience the hospitality industry here, it's all very well and good you telling us that, oh, they're lovely people, smiling people, and all that, but that doesn't really help us. What would help us is if you told us some of the negatives that you've encountered. What are these negatives that you may have encountered?
Well, one of the biggest one is, and that's not just about the hospitality industry, it's across the board. Being an island, it's very easy to start gazing at your navel.
Right.
So there is a bit of navel gazing, which makes the country involuntarily insular. Or it also at the same time makes it voluntarily outward, which means people just use their dual citizenships and move on from this and don't stay in Colombo and just use it as a holiday resort. The second part of it is, again, part of being an island, is there are limited opportunities and projects which can happen. You have a very controlled, very educated population of about 21 million odd, right? Together, it is very clear that you're talking about development and going down even to Gaul and Colombo and places like that.
Yeah.
But it is not infinite. So projects There's no point in completing a 3-year project in 2 years.
Because
what will you do for the other 1 year?
Right.
Resources, everything else.
Yeah.
Including daily labor and everything else.
Yeah.
Right? You can't have so much unemployment. So the pressure to complete before time, whether to build a highway or a hospital or a hotel or even a business, is less than what I find in India. But that has an upside.
Yeah.
You can focus on quality. In India at the moment, I think we are sacrificing good quality at the altar of speed.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good in the long term.
But the converse might be true here.
Could possibly be, but 20 years down the line, you'll have a quality road and we'll have potholes.
Right. Well, we'll have to wait and see. But what I want to say to you is, now we've had Indian companies. We've been talking about the attraction of our multi-unit dwellings, flats, apartments, condominiums to the Indian market. But also now, if you look at the other side, the commercial side, we've had relatively big name Indian companies come here, invest in a hospital, let's say, and only to find that their investment has gone down several notches.
Why?
Because the share price has all gone down. So people who bought it at 64 rupees are now finding that they can hardly get 40 for it or whatever it is.
Wrong business model for the Indian company.
Yes.
What I would like to do is, instead of setting up manufacturing in, let's say, Karnataka or Tamil Nadu or even Kerala, why not set it up here and export?
But do you realize that Sri Lanka has probably the greatest number of holidays ever than any other country in this region?
Yes, therefore it has the greatest amount of refreshed people coming to work after a holiday.
That's another way of looking at it.
And you simply do this on an HR basis. The day after the holiday, like today is Poya, tomorrow you work a 10-hour day.
Right.
Because you're refreshed and relaxed. Hey, it's no big deal. Countries have, Indians, we have, 19 days plus, including the 104 weekends, 104 days of weekends. So, yeah, that's, it needs to be utilized. I always look at it the positive side. I have more refreshed people coming to work after a holiday than the drudges. In fact, I would highly recommend to many people that you have your weekend as Wednesday and Sunday.
I see.
You have 3 days of very productive work.
But so Sri Lanka is still its appeal remains to the Indian visitor to Sri Lanka.
Absolutely, because let's look at comparative holiday locations in India. Goa, led by Goa, or even if you don't go down the coast, Kollam and other places in Kerala, or even on the east coast. Sri Lanka provides infrastructure for tourism, not the hottest in the world, but certainly much better than you get in India. And you wouldn't believe this, flying Delhi to Colombo is cheaper than flying Delhi to Goa. Flying Delhi to Bangkok is cheaper than flying Delhi to Goa.
Right, I see.
And the hotels are bloody expensive.
Right.
Terribly expensive.
I see. Well, we want to. I wonder if I should ask you this, but anyway, I'll ask you. The people in Tamil Nadu, we had a leader who's now obviously Jayalalitha has passed away, but they were giving our government here a rather tough time. But they were trying to hold this government, trying to push them to achieve some change, some betterment in the north. Do you think that the people in the north here are now going to be sorely missing this, the absence of Ms. Jayalalitha and now her partner who's in prison and so on and so forth.
I think that actually you've answered your own question. When policy is driven by individuals and individuality, it can only last as long as the person is alive. So if at all Tamil Nadu's support is needed for the North, it is not going to be based on individuals. It's going to be based on economic development, interlinkages, and constantly we are faced with this, so many fishermen from this side being taken, so many fishermen. You see, there has to be a cohesive policy so that it is not individual dependent. I mean, Mr. Karunanidhi is 93, 94 years old. Does M.K. Stalin, his son and heir, have the same views? I don't know. Neither does India, nor the Tamil Nadu state, nor the North or the Sri Lankan government have a... So it's a question of a sit down and chat and come to a solution. That's what I would do from a business point of view. Unfortunately, people think politics is a different animal. But at the end of the day, it's not. It's clear-cut objectives and ways to get there.
What about India's influence in the region?
Well, the one big stumbling block, we all know, is to our northwest, and we'll keep it at that.
Right.
Elsewhere, there are constant satisfactions which don't get reported between India and Bangladesh. I think the cooperation is the highest level. There is an internal issue with the Madhesis in Nepal, where India has taken a lukewarm stand, quite rightly so, because again you get accused of bullying. And with Sri Lanka, I think it's going to be a win-win situation.
You're positive?
Absolutely. I'm the kind of guy who looks at 3 drops of water in a glass and calls it full.
Right. Okay. As we coming towards the end of this, what about dynastic politics, nepotism, and so on?
You mean in the US?
I mean in India.
India and Sri Lanka. I thought, the Bushes and the Clintons and dynastic politics, I don't know. Okay, let's talk about India and Sri Lanka.
How
You've got to look at it from the perspective of crafts and arts. You don't get surprised if a doctor's son becomes a doctor. You don't get surprised if a military officer's son or daughter joins the military.
So
why are you surprised that a boy or a girl who's hearing in the drawing room talk around politics and issues will not take to it? So the level of competency can be seen as a success or a failure. Currently, India is bordering on failure, but let's see.
And do you think that the average Indian who arrives in this country, the businessman, is looking at, because I'm looking at the foreign direct investments flowing into Sri Lanka. From 2014 to now, there's hardly a comparison. From $1.6 billion US, it's now around, in 2016, it was 450 million. So the drop is significant and substantial. Do you think that Indian businessmen looking at Sri Lanka thinking, oh my God, these guys are taking over businesses, they're imposing backdated taxes, they're calling them ill-gotten gains, there's no investigations, but they're doing backdated stuff.
In India?
Yeah.
Well, you should see what happened in India, the entire Vodafone case. Governments do tend to get misguided on the economic and business front for populism. It is always, forget communism breaking down and Marxism not working. It'll always be popular if you fight for the common man. But the common man's good does not come from subsidies and blockages and barriers. The good actually comes from employment and economic growth, which is one of the great things that Modi said. I will empower you to earn your living and I won't give you a dole. I won't give you a subsidy. And that's how he won, part of the reason he won UP. It's about time the common man, and he's educated and connected enough, common man or woman, to know that if I get employment through industry, I will be forever free. But if I get money because of this and that government's policy, 5 years later, I won't have that subsidy.
Neil Chatterjee, thank you very much for having been on Newsline. We have positively enjoyed your half an hour with us.
Thank you very much for us.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us if you're up this early.
Indeed. And that's it from Newsline, but just a little note of advice, please. As we enter this long week instead of a long weekend, please bear in mind that one must be mindful when one is trying to enter places to bathe and so on, rivers and what have you, to be aware of the depth and your ability and to be able to handle these situations, because obviously our security forces, the police, the ambulance and so on, they'll be all operating at full stretch. So they may not be able to get to you if you make these sort of mistakes. So bear in mind, be mindful, and don't let any substance, liquid or otherwise, to get in your way of rational thinking. On that note, do take care. Have a great, great week ahead of you, and God bless.